Marvin Harrison Jr., a very disappointing game for his season debut. In fantasy, is a lot of guys, they panic with performances like this. 1 for 4 in his NFL debut as a rookie. That's got to be easily your #1 buy candidate among the wide receivers. Find those managers that are, you know, upset with these performances and try to buy them now. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to talk buy, sell, pick up, and drop for week 3. We're going to take an early look at some guys to get for this upcoming week. We've got one more game left on Monday Night Football, and we're going to get a head start on week 3 just like we did last week with week 2. We'll get right into it. Please subscribe to this channel if you're interested in more fantasy football content, as well as a lot of other content that you can see in the description below. We're going to go through all the positions just like we did last time. We're going to go through quarterbacks, pickups, drops, buy, sell. Then we're going to do running backs, wide receiver, tight end, touch defense, and kicker a little bit at the end. So who are the quarterbacks to pick up this week? I think the performance today pretty much validated that Derek Carr needs to be a top 12 quarterback, rostered in all leagues at this time. Looked excellent against what we thought was a good defense in the Dallas Cowboys. Excellent performance today. We look at Derek Carr's numbers overall this season. He's got a total of 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. He also has a rushing touchdown today that helped his numbers a little bit. And he's doing all this with very minimal volume. He only threw 23 attempts in the first game and 16 today. So there's going to be some more game scripts later on for this team where he's going to be more involved and need to pass more. So all that being said, it's setting up well for Derek Carr to be a very efficient quarterback in fantasy this year. Got to pick him up if he's on waivers, if he's available, in my opinion. Other guys to look at as well. Sam Darnold, another validation game for him. Played very well today. Obviously, big touchdown. Justin Jefferson today kind of inflated his numbers a little bit. But 2 touchdowns today, 268 yards. Interceptions in 2 games, though. But overall, if Darnold, especially in 2 quarterback leagues, is getting to the point where he's startable now. And I think that if he's available on waivers, he's definitely a good guy to pick up if you're one of the 2 managers that needs a quarterback. Real quick, I'm going to touch on some other guys as well if you're in more deeper league formats. Malik Willis shows today that he could be serviceable as well. Showed some rushing upside today, but also was efficient passing. Didn't really make a lot of mistakes. So very encouraging sign for Malik Willis that, like, if you're in a position where you're in a 2 quarterback league and you're in a pinch, maybe you can throw him in there and he could do pretty well. He's got a tough matchup next week against Tennessee, but overall looks like a serviceable player. And then 2 guys in very deep leagues that I would recommend stashing at this time due to poor performances of the starting quarterbacks are Andy Dalton of the Carolina Panthers and Jameis Winston of the Cleveland Browns. Bryce Young is looking like the worst quarterback in football right now. I would not be surprised if he's benched by midseason based on how he's playing currently. Jameis Winston is backing up Deshaun Watson, who we know everything going on with that. It's not looking too good for him. They're lucky they won today, because if they didn't win, I think with everything coming out of Deshaun Watson, this may have been the last straw for him. But stash those guys if you're in deep quarterback leagues and you have space, because they could be very well starting in the foreseeable future. Drop candidates. So in deeper leagues, if you don't have a bench IR spot, I think it's safe to drop Tua at this time. I think that we don't really know his situation. Ideally, I would not want to do that, but if you're in a pinch and you're 0-2 and you need to get another option, I think it's safe to move on from that situation and try to find another quarterback. Other quarterbacks in more deep leagues, if you have Jared Goff and Trevor Lawrence, I think both of those guys, they really do not give you a lot of upside in terms of rushing value. They're not off to the best starts this season. If you're, if you're playing where you have a backup and there's other flex players that you need, those are guys that you can drop. Or if you're in a situation where you need to get Carr or Darnold, I think that both of them right now are better players to have on your roster than Trevor Lawrence. Jared Goff, you can kind of go back and forth on whether or not you have him or Darnold. I probably still prefer Goff over Darnold, but overall, Neither of them I don't think are essential. Some guys that you want to buy. And overall, the quarterback play is down. So this is kind of just based on big names more necessarily than poor performances among players that are kind of on the fringe. But I'm going to try to arrange the buys by tiers. So the people I'm going to mention first are going to be the guys that are higher tier, are going to require more capital. And then later on, it's going to be players that you want to give a little bit less for. Josh Allen is the one I would try to get the highest right now. 9 points on Thursday, which is not good by his standards at all, but he also really didn't need to get involved. It would take a lot to get him, and it would be you'd have to really do some convincing. But if there's any opportunity, if you really want him on your team, this is probably the best chance to do it, because he's just simply not going to put up performances like this very often. Other guys, probably a little more realistic to get, Anthony Richardson. So Anthony Richardson played poorly today, but there is no denying that this guy is an excellent fantasy football asset. There's going to be a lot of stuff that comes out in Get Up, First Take, things like that about Anthony Richardson going to the bench, Andrew Luck potentially being the starting quarterback. There's going to be some rumblings about that based on a performance like today. But ultimately, Anthony Richardson gives you such a cheat code in terms of his rushing ability. His turnovers are wildly inconsistent. But if there's any opportunity to buy him based on poor performances, now is probably the best time to do that. He showed flashes in game 1, but there's going to be people out there who are not going to be patient with him given some of the volatility. And if you can make a move to try to get Anthony Richardson, I would definitely recommend doing that. So, for example, if you picked up somebody like Derek Carr or Baker Mayfield, who I'm going to talk about in a minute in the sell category, I would trade them for Anthony Richardson personally. And then a low caliber buy that you can consider as well as Brock Purdy. Not playing great to his standards. He had just under 14 fantasy points in decimal leagues and at 10.3 the first game. I think things will get better for Brock Purdy. I think there's a little bit of chemistry things they're trying to work out with Christian McCaffrey not being there, Brandon Ayuk being reintegrated into practice. I think things are going to get better for Brock Purdy. And they're playing the Rams next week, which you look at how Kyler Murray just did against them. I think that's a good opportunity to try to get Purdy while his value is kind of low right now. Guys to sell, I mentioned Baker Mayfield. He's playing great, top 5 quarterback thus far on the season, but he really does not give you a lot of rushing upside. And that's why I would ultimately prefer somebody like Anthony Richardson over Baker Mayfield for that reason. Yes, you're going to get some turnovers, but Anthony Richardson is always going to be a threat to house it from 30 yards, running the ball. You saw his throws week 1 where he could sling it down the field, hit guys in stride. I would personally rather have Richardson than Mayfield, given that rushing upside that you get gives you a little bit of a higher floor potential. And the thing with Tampa that concerns me is their inability to run the ball. Eventually, they're going to kind of figure out how to attack that team and slow their offense down. And could be some poor performances for Mayfield coming up down the stretch. And then last name, Mahomes. I talked about him last week. He is we just have to look at this guy, as I've been saying for over a year, as not a consistent fantasy football asset. He is an excellent quarterback. He's probably top 3 all time, but he is not giving you the rushing value that a lot of people think that he gives you, and his capital is just not worth the range that he's going. So you could always trade him to somebody who really loves Mahomes, doesn't really understand the intricacies of fantasy football, but you look at how he did today. He had 12.9. He had 15 in game 1, and last season he averaged around 16 fantasy points per game. That's just not good enough for the range that he's going in drafts. So if you can get him for a good flex, I would try to pounce on that now before he keeps putting up performances like this, which I think are just going to continue to happen throughout the season. And with Pacheco gone, I don't think it's going to get any better for them. All right. So if you're interested in content like this, please subscribe. As I said earlier, I had a lot of views on my last video, and I want to thank everybody who commented. If you comment your questions of guys that you're interested in trading for, I reply to all my comments. As long as you're replying with something coherent. There are some people that I don't know what they're saying in the comments, But if you reply with a comment, a question, some guys you're looking at on your roster, run it by me, and I'm happy to answer it and give my opinion. I like helping you guys out. That's what I'm here for. So take advantage of this while it's a small channel, still growing. So we'll get into the running backs now. A lot of very good options out here. A lot of injuries today. So this is a good section to pay attention to for running backs. First, see if Zach Charbonnet is out there. There was news that came out about Kenneth Walker's injury. Charbonnet was kind of a midweek grab. If he's still available for whatever reason, make sure you get him because he showed that he can be effective today as the lead ball carrier. The number one guy that I would try to get, though, is Braelon Allen. Braelon Allen, breakout game today. You look at his total numbers, 2 touchdowns on the day. Breece Hall was not injured or anything. They just used him as a change of pace back. Braelon Allen, ultimately on the day, looking at his numbers real quick, he only had 9 touches, but he had 2 touchdowns, 33 yards rushing, 23 yards receiving. Yeah, so that's as good as you can get as a handcuff. And if you're a Breece Hall manager, this has to be priority number 1 on waivers. I would even drop 20+% of fab to make sure I have this guy, because then if we learned anything from Christian McCaffrey, you have to have the handcuffs to these running backs. And if I'm Breece Hall's manager, I want to make sure at all costs that I have Braelon Allen on my team and that I'm getting him on my roster. Because worst case scenario, and Hall cannot play, then now you know from today that Allen is more than capable of stepping up and being an elite fantasy asset for you. Other guys to keep an eye on as well, kind of in similar vein, are I'm going to talk first Bucky Irving of Tampa Bay. A lot of the top performers today were already rostered. But Bucky Irving, Rachaad White is struggling this season, dealing with injury now. Irving has looked better in 2 games so far, and he's lightly rostered. So Tampa Bay, maybe the spark they need is just switching things up in the backfield. And this is a really good opportunity to try to get Irving now while he still hasn't really put up great numbers so far. Because you never know how these things go, and this is a good opportunity for him to potentially take over depending on how bad White's injury is. Ty Chandler is another one to keep an eye on. Aaron Jones kind of struggled with his efficiency today, and Chandler looked pretty good. So that's another situation to monitor moving forward, and I would be happy to try to get Chandler on my team if I can, see what happens there. And then the Browns, interestingly enough, I really like Jerome Ford, but very surprising today that Deontay Foreman got double the amount of carries of Ford. Didn't do very well with them, but still 14 carries versus 7 for Ford. That really makes me wonder what's going to happen with this Browns backfield moving forward. And I would want to stash Foreman if I can, just to make sure that I have him on my team. But the more important concept that I want to talk about here is handcuffing. And if you could watch my video from a couple weeks ago to see more about this, excuse me, not a couple weeks ago, a couple days ago, sorry. But anyway, make sure if you own an elite running back, you want to make sure you get the handcuff this week, because a lot of injuries are happening already to some of these guys, and you want to make sure that you have their backup in worst case scenarios. So for New Orleans, if you have Alvin Kamara, get Jamaal Williams. If you are Miami's Devon Achane owner, make sure you have some combination of Raheem Mostert or Jaylen Wright. I kind of prefer Wright, but make sure you have them to handcuff Achane. If you're the Chargers, make sure you handcuff J.K. Dobbins with Gus Edwards. If you're at Buffalo, James Cook, make sure you handcuff Ray Davis as your backup to James Cook. You can make an argument for other guys as well, like Jonathan Taylor, Trey Sermon, New England, for Ramondre Stevenson to get Antonio Gibson. Guys like that, it's really important to make sure you have the handcuffs to these guys, because then you don't have to, you have another backup option available to you. And right now, for some of these elite running backs, make sure that you get the backup for them. I will caveat, though, some teams you have to be careful of, and that's why I'm not as high on picking up these guys from Kansas City right now with Pacheco's injury. Is it going to be Samaje Perine, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or the new guy? I have to double check his name right now. But like, there's 3 potential guys that they could all throw in for Kansas City, and I really feel that what Andy Reid is going to do is split it up into a 3-committee backfield. It's going to be messy. It's either Pacheco or nobody for me in that system. Guys to drop. You really do not want to be dropping running backs unless there's something that you have to have. I would not drop guys like Spears, like I mentioned last week. I would not drop guys like Chase Brown. I would try to not drop the majority of running backs unless the team just looks abysmally bleak. You know, Jaylen Warren is another one. He outplayed Harris for the most part today, in my opinion. You might want to look at Denver, though, as some of these running backs that I just really do not see that situation getting better. And I talked about Carolina as well. Chuba Hubbard did okay today, but ultimately their value is going to be capped by the quarterback play and the offense. So if you want to mess with that, fine, but I just don't see like any real upside to those teams right now in terms of the running back fields. Buy candidates. Obviously, number one, if you could get CMC, I think now is the time to do that. I know it's risky because of his Achilles tendonitis, but a lot of times with those injuries, if you give it time to heal, it does get better. And I think they're smart by taking a precaution, letting it heal. Those injuries can get better in about a month and a half. And if you could ultimately have Christian McCaffrey, if you're 2-0, you're in a good position right now and you can stash Christian McCaffrey. What ultimately matters is the playoffs. And if McCaffrey's good to go by December, then you've got a league-winning guy right there. So start planning for how to do that and strategize that. Because if you're looking great so far and you can afford to take on McCaffrey, definitely shoot your shot there. Other guys to look at as well that I really like is Brian Robinson from the Washington Commanders. This guy is really flying under the radar right now. He's getting a lot of volume, but he has not converted into a lot of points. The first game, he had 12 carries for 40 yards, which was not great, and he had a touchdown. But today he had 17 carries for 133 yards, which only amounted to 14.6. It's somewhat, it's not stood out, but what you like is that this guy has got a clear role as the number one running back. And their offense is looking better with Jaden Daniels. And I feel that Brian Robinson is a guy that a lot of people, if casuals are not familiar with him, and if you could buy him from somebody who is, not impressed, you throw a big name out there like some of the ones I'm going to mention, you could probably grab Brian Robinson, and that would be a better deal for you, in my opinion. Other guys to look at as well are Kyron Williams and Tony Pollard. Kyron Williams is a high capital player, and it's going to take a lot to get him, but there's a good case to be made that his volume is going to increase now that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are injured. And Tony Pollard, kind of the same thing. Tajay Spears is out right now. Not really sure what his role is going to be moving forward. But Tony Pollard has not put up crazy numbers yet either, but he's going to have more opportunity now with Spears out. Sell candidates. Derrick Henry, as I mentioned last week, not looking great to start the season, and that's a name that you could sell for. And if you could get Brian Robinson for him, I would do that, to be honest. Other guys, Najee Harris. He was a name a couple years back who's kind of struggled in more recent years, but really not doing great with his efficiency right now for Pittsburgh. And I think that's a guy that you can try to sell off his week 1 performance and see what you can get. I would still recommend selling Ramondre if you can. I kind of underestimated how he was going to do this season. I will admit that. But I do not foresee him continuing at this top 10 pace throughout the season. So I think if you could sell him as well, that's a solid deal. And Austin Eckler, that's more of a low sell guy that you can grab a sneaky player for. But another name value that's clearly the number 2 back in Washington, as I just talked about with Brian Robinson. Wide receivers now. So first of all, check if Jackson Smith-Njigba is there. He may have been dropped from week 1 and did very well today. Tons of targets. You really like what you see there from him. Also checked if DeMarcus Robinson is available. This was another late addition after Puka Nacua was placed on IR to the waivers this week, and now he's going to have an even bigger role with Kupp out at least for now. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to play in week 3. So check if they're out there. I'm not very high on him though, because this is a huge drop off from Kupp and Nacua in terms of talent, but there's going to be opportunity for him. The number 1 receiver that I would try to get on this week is Quentin Johnson. This guy was very inconsistent in his rookie season, and today was his best game of his career. so far. 6 targets, 5 for 51, and 2 touchdowns. Not a ton of volume, but relative to the rest of the receiving core, he is the most athletic of the receivers. He has the highest draft capital invested into him, and he's put up the best performance so far. So it's going to really be between him and Ladd McConkey. Josh Palmer has clearly fallen off as a guy that's droppable, as I already mentioned. But Quentin Johnson, you like this role that he's going to have on this team. And I think when Chargers get into games where they're going to need to throw the ball more, he's going to have some more involvement than this. And I really like him as somebody that you can stash, not start right away, but see what develops, and could be a great investment for you. Another guy that I really like, who you can also get for probably even cheaper fab, maybe you could get him for just $1, is Jalen Tolbert. 9 targets today. You really like to see that. 6 for 82, no touchdowns, but he had an incredible catch falling on his back. This team needs number 2 receiver. Brandon Cooks did not live up to that. And yeah, Tolbert could be the guy to step up, and it's worth stashing him on the bench and seeing what happens with him. I do like him as somebody that you can pick up among the receivers and take a flyer on. Some other guys that I would like to mention as well that I did not give credit to the week before did better today. Rashid Shaheed and Alec Pierce. Those are guys that I've said are very volatile, and Shaheed just keeps pulling it off where he gets these long touchdowns. But another great game for him today. He was 4 for 96 and 1. Very good. 3 carries as well. And then Alec Pierce impressively had 7 targets today, 5 for 56 and a touchdown. So, but I'm going to talk about these 2 in a minute, so stay tuned. And then other guys that I'm not very interested in right now that did okay this week, I need to see a little more. Andre Iosivas from Cincinnati. Good game, but he had 2 touchdowns on 2 targets. That's a recipe for volatility right now. Need to see some more target share from him moving forward. And Jalen Naylor, kind of the same thing. Had a touchdown today, but I want to see some more consistency with him before picking him up. And then Jerry Jeudy, the same thing with the Browns. Had a solid game today, but overall an inconsistent player. But you do like 6 targets, 5 for 73. Just need to see a little more right now. Guys to drop. I think, like I said with some of these offenses, Deontay Johnson just not cutting it right now. I think that it's safe to drop him in certain leagues because just the offense is just looking brutal. Same with Cortland Sutton. Christian Watson put up a goose egg today. I think that you could safely drop him until it's clear what Jordan Love is coming back. And then Christian Kirk for Jacksonville, which is another team that's not looking very great offensively either. Yeah, those are guys that I'll be comfortable dropping all of them. Guys to buy among the wide receivers. So first of all, if you're 2-0 and you could stash Puka and Kupp, try to get them. The managers that are 0-2 that have them may not be willing to wait that long until they come back. The guy that I would try to get number 1, though, is Ja'Marr Chase, because Chase has, for the most part, struggled. He's been dealing with a lot of contract stuff, so people are a little bit lower on him than they usually are. But next week, he gets the Washington Commanders, which look at what Malik Neighbors did this week, and then look at what happened to them in week 1. This is the perfect opportunity to try to get Ja'Marr Chase before he plays Washington. And, yeah, so try to get him now because he's not going to put up performances like 7.5 moving forward. 4 for 34, not a good game, but it's going to get better for Chase. And then same with Brandon Ayuk. This week, Brandon Ayuk is going to get the Los Angeles Rams, which you look at what Marvin Harrison just did to them. So, yeah. Other guys that you could try to buy for lower value that I like that have struggled so far in the season is the combination of these 3 players. Michael Pittman, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin. You could get those 3 for all very low prices right now because they're all struggling, but they all are number 1 receivers. You could probably throw George Pickens into this as well. These are guys that I would not spend a lot for, but at the same time, they could be great value because they are clearly the number 1 receiver on that team. They've just got some limitations at quarterback right now that are making them inconsistent value. But their value is low right now based on how they performed this season, and you could probably get them at a pretty solid discount right now based on how they're playing. And then another guy, more lower, sneaky guy to keep an eye on who struggled today, Lad McConkey, because I do think that he's going to get more involved when the Chargers are in situations where they need to throw more. And I do like his potential to step up as a first or second receiver on this team too. Guys to sell. DK Metcalf, great game today, but I'm telling you, this guy is not a consistent fantasy football player. He has a bigger name value than he puts out on the field. As you can see, last week he had 5.9. Today he had 28.9 in full PPR. But the story with him, he's always up and down. He doesn't give you the consistency. I do like that he got 14 targets today. That was really nice. But historically, he's been very inconsistent. He's very dependent on which cornerback is guarding him. And yeah, so I just think that in situations like this, you know you have a volatile player. Try to sell him for somebody that is more consistent, that gives you a better value. And then another guy that I would look to sell as well is Chris Olave. Olave is a second-round rated receiver who just simply is not giving you that production. And yeah, the Saints are putting up tons of points, but it's just not, you're not getting the volume share of Chris Olave that you would like to get from somebody that is his caliber of a player. So for me personally, I would try to move on from him and try to sell him to somebody that is still buying into this idea that he could be an elite number one. But just simply, the story with him and Derek Carr so far is that he's not the preferred number one. Carr spreads it around. Right now it's looking like Kamara and Shaheed, oddly enough. But it's going to be mixed around between different guys, like Taysom Hill is going to get involved, Juwan Jennings. They're going to get some other receivers, things like that. It's just, it doesn't seem like it's consistently going to Olave like you would like. And for that reason, I would like to try to sell him. And I just talked about Shaheed. Him and Alec Pierce are both doing very well. They're both top 20 receivers right now in fantasy football, but I'm telling you, they're not going to stay there. So try to trade them for some of these guys that I'm talking about in a package, because I think that both of them are doing well and they're probably rostered by now. But you can pick them up, and if you already have them on their team, try to flip them now while their value is good. And I think you can get a pretty solid return for them. So if you're looking at Alec Pierce versus Michael Pittman on his own team, I would prefer Pittman, to be honest, because Pittman ultimately is a better athlete. He's not clicking right now with Anthony Richardson, but I do like Pittman's projections moving forward still on his own team. And then other guys that struggled this week, but you could try to sell just based on their week one performances, are Alan Lazard and Brandon Cooks. These guys are probably both worthy of being dropped, but they did so well in week one that you could probably flip them for somebody better, and maybe get somebody to buy into the fact that, they just had a down week, but they're going to go back to what they did in week one, even though deep down that's not actually going to happen, and you could fleece them, because that's what we all try to do in this. Tight ends. So the number one guy to pick up among tight ends, this is actually a better week for picking up tight ends, in my opinion, than last week with Isaiah Likely. But Hunter Henry, man, the amount of targets that he got was awesome today. Really like to see that. Hunter Henry is just 10% rostered in ESPN leagues, but he got 8 for 109 on 12 targets, which that's more than most wide receivers. And I think tight end play across the board right now is just so poor that I think you really got to find these guys that are getting consistent roles in their offense. That's why I really like Brock Bowers. I'm going to talk about it in a bit. But Henry, you really like the fact that he's getting 12 targets. Jacoby Brissett really likes his tight ends. New England, we've already talked about how they don't really have great receivers on that team. So this sets up to be an excellent formula for Henry moving forward. And if he's out there, you got to grab him this week. He's definitely going to be my number one tight end pickup. I probably like him more than most of the wide receivers this week as well. Another guy that I really like as well, if you can't get Henry, is Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, a talented tight end who had has had good fantasy relevance from time to time. Now with Cincinnati, and he may be in his best situation yet. 7 for 91 on 9 targets. The Bengals need some guys to step up beyond Jamar Chase, especially if Higgins is going to stay out. And you really like this volume from Gesicki. He's a talented tight end. Made some athletic plays in the game today against Kansas City. If this could be the formula moving forward, this is a very good low buy candidate that you can get on waivers for minimal fab and could be a guy that you can play every week and give you modest results. Other guys as well. These are some sneakier options that you can get in deeper leagues. Jonnu Smith has played 2 very good games so far relative to the rest of the position. Well, excuse me, just 1. But he had 6 for 51 the other day, 7 targets. Again, Skylar Thompson is probably going to rely on the tight end more because he's just not as talented a quarterback as Tua. So this could be a good formula moving forward using Jonnu Smith. And then other guys as well. Luke Schoonmaker filling in for Jake Ferguson did well today. He had 6 for 43 on 6 targets. You like the target share. I like guys like that more than some of these guys that did well this week that had just 1 touchdown, like Elijah Higgins, 1 catch, 1 touchdown. That would be a no. Darnell Washington, 1 catch, 1 touchdown. That would also be a no. So drops. So there's not really. First of all, do not panic with these guys that are struggling. Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Dalton Kincaid. I would not drop them. Guys that I would drop, Foster Moreau put up a 0 today, did well week 1, you can move on. And then if in really deep leagues, this is a controversial take, but Evan Ingram I think you can drop. I do not like what I see with the Jags offense. I do not see that situation getting better. So I think if you have to, I would try to get Henry or Gesicki over Evan Ingram rest of the season. And then buy candidates. There's not really any one tight end that I would want to buy except for this one player. And that's Brock Bowers. Because Brock Bowers is, to me, he's on his offense, he is the 1A, 1B, him and Devontae Adams with Gardner Minshew. And Brock Bowers is in the position where he's the top 5 tight end. He hasn't even scored a touchdown yet. And that's going to come as the season goes along. So if you're going to buy him at any time, you got to do that right now because especially in keeper formats, this guy looks like he's going to be locked in as an elite tight end for years to come. And the reason that I would invest in Bowers and not the guys like Andrews, Laporta, Kincaid is because they are not clearly the number 1. Sam Laporta is now in a situation where he's got both running backs, Gibbs and Montgomery, and ASB and Jamison Williams that are all competing with him. So that's why I never really liked Sam Laporta as a pick that high anyway. Mark Andrews is off to a slow start this season, but he did do better today. And then Kincaid just not really standing out as much as we would like. I would not be actively looking to buy or sell these players necessarily because it's going to take some capital to probably buy Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, etc. That's probably not worth it right now. Guys that I would try to sell. So first of all, Travis Kelce has been playing terribly this season, but I'm telling you, there is going to be some Taylor Swift fan out there playing fantasy football who would be happy to have Travis Kelce on their team. Find that person and gladly give him away as soon as possible, in my opinion, because you could probably get much better value moving forward than him. And then Isaiah Likely. He had a very good week 1, but I think the reality of his situation is more of what you saw today, is that it's going to more likely be Mark Andrews that's going to be targeted. Likely had a very good game week 1, but it's kind of an outlier in my opinion. So try to take advantage of that incredible week 1 now before there's another performance that doesn't live up to that standard, and take advantage of that with the people looking for tight ends. So now we're going to talk defense. The defense that I really like for this week. So first of all, Minnesota, I was wrong about them in San Francisco. They look good. You got to grab them. I think they're a team that you can probably start every week now. And then if your matchup streaming, Cleveland is playing the Giants. So a good matchup there. Las Vegas is playing the Panthers, who pretty much will always be mentioned as a good streaming offense to go against. Green Bay is playing Tennessee, and Seattle is playing Miami, which is now lacking Tua. So those are all good defenses to consider in the streaming. You could probably drop Baltimore right now because ultimately they're kind of just not getting it done relative to the other defenses. But do not drop Dallas based on how they did today because they're still very talented, and I think they'll have better performances moving forward. Kickers as well to look at. So if you noticed in my kicker video that I said kickers are relatively worthless, all the guys that did really well in week 1 that were off waivers relatively struggled today relative to the rest of the kickers. And the guys that did really well today did not do very well in week 1. The only exception to that is Brandon Aubrey, who I've already said is an elite kicking talent that you have to make sure you keep on your team if you have him. But a lot of these other guys you can plug in week in and week out. And the guys that I like for this upcoming week are Jason Myers. And really the formula that I'm looking at kickers at this point are which teams are struggling to run the ball, because these are the teams not getting it into the end zone and thus settling for field goals. Seattle, Jason Myers, they had some struggle converting. He's always been a very solid kicker anyway. That's been very sleeper friendly. Daniel Carlson, Las Vegas is struggling to get some touchdowns running the ball. And then Chase McLaughlin for Tampa Bay. Those are 3 to consider for this upcoming week. All right, well, that's all I've got for this week. Thank you for checking out this video, and stay tuned for more fantasy football content as we go through the regular season. I'll talk to you guys later.